Welcome to Rauta's Reviews. This time we go all the way to United States of America and in fact to you 2020. Why 2020 is that one of the most important release in so many ways comes from America from 2020. This album, however, arrived here late due to some, let's say, communication problems, but here we are finally with Akhlys' third album, Melinoë. I don't know so much about the pronunciation, but that's what you have today. This one comes with 5 tracks and a really sinister cover. I don't know, there is something really sinister with this creature and its beautiful smile. And it fits the mood totally perfectly, because this is very dark release. One of the darkest releases, most sinister and most dark releases ever in 2020. And the style here is rather unusual. I know that this is one of those releases that got a little bit of a too much hyped already last year and the past few months. And the reason is obviously this. This is not your typical black metal release, nor it is your typical ambient release, but it definitely has both of these worlds included. And it's a curious story because this band more or less started with a kind of an ambient project and kind of soon evolved into a black metal release. But even with this album you can hear best of both worlds, best of both parts. Now the main man of the band is also known for his other ventures within metal, so I guess it would be safe to say that Akhlys is somewhat of a side project. And it's a curious one because really it's not your typical black metal album, and in fact it's so curious that in my opinion the band is at its boring with this album when it's doing those rather typical black metal moments. That is fast tempo, drumming, kind of a blast beaty stuff, and just, intense playing. And even though that is dark and sinister, it's a little bit of heard it a million times. It's good, but not exactly mind-blowing. Where this gets better though is when you kind of put the metal part on the background and focus on the sonic darkness here. That is how I would describe this music, because there are lots of these points or say moments when it's all about creating this really sinister, this evil feeling, this atmosphere that is not just made with shredding guitars but kind of in the dark ambient ways. Sometimes it's something that you can pretty much figure out, okay, this is done with synths, but that's not always the case when you're talking about dark ambient. For example, I prefer listening to dark ambient when I don't know what kind of instrument is being played, if it's instrument in the first place, and when there are no drums, no vocals, no patterns of percussion and all that stuff. And that's, in my opinion, where Akhlys is also at its best, sounding like less typical black metal. Now it's seamlessly combining these two elements, and I think that's the beauty of this whole album. I was already reading some comments, like people saying like, okay, some people it's thinking like it's the best album of the year because it's boom, so different. And some people felt probably quite the opposite, like, okay, it's overhyped because everybody's hyping up and it's not living to, up to this hype. Now, I'm in between. I don't think this album is, overhyped in the terms of like, it is kind of acquired taste kind of thing. If you don't like ambient parts, and if you haven't been listening to those, you can easily get into either of these ends. You can feel like, okay, it's boring when there is not just that black metal thing. And some people might already feel the thing called overhype because, when something is being drummed time after time and everybody's like, hey, it's that album, you gotta check it out. And people are like, I'm bored. And by the time you get listening to it, your expectations are so high, no album ever could fulfill those expectations. Now, for people who are then again kind of allergic to use of synths and other instruments in this way, might also feel like, okay, it's not worth the hype because I don't like this kind of music, and that kind of explains it all. For the rest of us, it's a different story. Now, I wouldn't say it's a perfect album. By no means. There are way too many common black metal parts on this album to say it's a perfect one, but it's really enjoyable one. And the reason is this: it is really indeed, in my opinion, the darkest and most sinister album of 2020. It came a little late to the party being a mid-December 2020 release, but nevertheless it doesn't remove any of those factors that make it so dark, and that's what really rules here. Now my problem with the album is it has kind of a lengthy songs, and especially with those faster blast beat parts, it gets a little bit repetitive, monotone and all that stuff. Now it doesn't really bother me, but it could be a lot better if there was more variety, certain kind of diversity in any way. Anyway, for people who like both dark ambient and black metal, this is definitely a must-have CD or LP, whatever your preference is. Must have to be listened to. In my opinion, this is really, really good and dark stuff. And in case you got interested, maybe the earlier releases by the band are worth checking out too. And once again, really, really nice packaging with a really nice cover art. Something that totally fits the mood here. It already gives you a little bit of a horror kind of a feeling with this album, and that's something to be expected. I hope you will give it a chance. It's a good album and worth checking out. Thanks for checking out the video. See you soon. More reviews coming away.